What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Rick Ross's debut studio album, Port of Miami. Now, this project came out in late summer 2006, and actually, the thing about it is Rick Ross's supposed true debut was MIAO, the mixtape from early 2006. So that actually was the true project that had his debut single Hustlin' on there, and also had a follow-up single in Chevy Riding High. That was a pretty big hit for Rick Ross around that time. But this is the actual project that hosts Rick Ross's true debut hits. It doesn't have Chevy Riding High on here, but it has most of his other hits from around the first several months of 2006 and that type of stuff. So it's pretty interesting to kind of get this. This is a real big splash of like Miami infused hip hop. Like Dirty South hip hop is one thing, but this is kind of a more Miami tint that only folks like Briscoe, Rick Ross, Trina, Plies, Trick Daddy, DJ Khaled, those type folks bring, Flo Rida, T-Pain. So I'm going to start covering as time goes along. I'm going to start getting to more Miami bred hip hop and that type of stuff. But this is definitely a very good splash of that around this time. Some great 2000s rap. And it has a lot of quality club cuts on here. This is a pretty outgoing project for what it was. And it's actually a rather seminal album where back in the day, folks kind of complained about this project just because it wasn't a classic and, rap albums weren't going platinum back in that time period. But looking back, obviously 17 some odd years later, the concept about it to me, this is definitely a 2000s rap classic album, damn near. It just is that good. I mean, a good thing about this project is the fact that it has 18 songs. So I definitely think if it would have slashed like 2, 3, or 4 songs, it probably would have basically been a 5-star album. But it is definitely going to get a pretty high score. I think out of 18 songs, there is a good chunk, probably more than 2/3 of the 18 songs on here are pretty damn good. That's definitely saying something. It's definitely a seminal late 2000s rap album, especially from the Dirty South. It's up there with the Carter 3, the Carter 2, Jeezy's Thug Motivation 101, T.I.'s King, the Birdman and Lil Wayne album, Like Father, Like Son. Just a number of those late 2000s rap albums. This is up there right with some of those. It has pretty signature stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the singles. So the first single was Hustlin', and this song is a song that kind of, I want to say, even debuted as far back as late 2005. It was just a real sprawling kind of organ infused, kind of real looming, kind of powerful rap hook type song. A lot of it is just based upon the powerful hook that it had. Real ode to hustling and that type of stuff, moving units, moving drugs, that type of stuff, moving kind of getting motivated, that sort of stuff. But it's just it's a powerful and emphatic song, and it's a great hit for Rick Ross. That right off the bat, he had a hit song. I think that's why so many people liked Rick Ross initially, is just because the first song that he dropped solo wise was this good of a hit. It was really one of his signature songs, and it continues to be a hit. I would almost wonder if it's like one of the last couple songs he performs at his concerts nowadays, just for old time's sake. But I just look after it's a definite hit, definite real Miami infused club cut. Just works as like, I mean, it just has such power in the clubs, just the way it feels. I mean, Jeezy definitely had some of that feeling, but this one's a little bit more looming, a little bit more imposing, that type feel towards it. I would definitely have to say I do like songs like Trap or Die, and I do like songs like Soul Survivor and some of that, but this just has like the real kind of a gas chorus about it that just kind of makes it have like that sort of like, it's not necessarily boom bap, but it just kind of has like a real boom in its voice that kind of gives it that kind of looming type feel. So it's a real nice one. The second single is another nice one. These are several hits that Rick Ross accumulated in 2006: Hustlin', Chevy Riding High, and Push It, the second single. So the second single was Push It, which samples Push It to the Limit from the early 80s, from maybe, I don't. It's at least from the Scarface movie from 1983. I don't know if Scarface the movie had a soundtrack that went along with it, but it's at least from that movie. So it's pretty dope that he found that song and decided to make like a rap song out of it and kind of give it some real powerful emphasis. That just kind of happens to be the concept. It's a nice club bop. I definitely feel like Push It's a nice one. This has a real kind of pace it, and yeah, real paced and kind of uppity tone towards it. Just really feels dramatic and kind of like a busybody type song. I would definitely say, definitely like it's probably. I actually would feel like some folks could enjoy this song more than Hustlin', where Hustlin's more kind of like the street single and a little bit more drug infused. I feel like Push It's a little bit more exuberant and kind of the sort of stuff that happened in the 80s, just with some of those kind of exuberant kind of club cuts and just that type of stuff that was just a little bit more glossy. Push It is definitely the glossier side of the Miami lifestyle that Rick Ross shows on this album. Hustlin's kind of more of the seedy underbelly, but this is definitely more of like the glossier side of it. The pink, the neon, the strip clubs, the flashiness, the glitz and the glamour and that type of stuff. So it's really interesting that Rick Ross nailed these two singles. Now, at least Wikipedia says that there's not a third single, but I remember several years ago there actually was a third single that they said was a third single back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s or so, and that was Cross That Line featuring Akon. I don't know if this song charted. I want to say that this song actually did chart a little bit. It was like the supposed last ditch effort for like a third single. I mean, really Push It and Hustlin' did extremely well, but I want to say that Cross the Line was at least the attempt. I don't know if there's a music video for it, but this one's a real dark and kind of looming kind of song. Also has the same looming type feeling as Hustlin'. It's another kind of street single like that. Akon delivers a pretty poignant hook, but it's not quite as glossy and as hit ready as Soul Survivor by Jeezy. It's just a lot more drug oriented and a lot more kind of dark and imposing type feel towards it, where it kind of gives off a more kind of angry kind of energy and just kind of more like grim kind of energy in a lot of ways. I feel like it's just not quite. I mean, at least Jeezy's Soul Survivor had a little bit more gloss to the point where it was just kind of a hook ready kind of meme type song. Maybe not meme type song, but just signature and kind of like packaged and distinct. But this one's a little bit more infused with like the drug life and kind of saying that this is kind of the concept. But it's just kind of, it's another street single basically. That's the whole concept about Hustlin' and Cross That Line are both street singles, but they work. Akon and Rick Ross just deliver a rather one of the darkest songs on the album, I'd have to say, apart from like It Ain't a Problem and I'm a G at the end of the album. So these are some of the darkest songs. It's not quite as glossy as Push It or something like that. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and list the 13 songs out of 18 that I recommend. Like I said, over 2/3 of this album is quite hot, so I definitely feel like that's a pretty much red hot and stuff. So I definitely feel like there's just a number of easy songs to bag and kind of say that these songs kick ass and that type of stuff. So I'll go ahead and list these 13 or 12 and a half because one's an almost song. So these 12 and a half, 13 songs would be Push It, Cross That Line, Blow, Boss, Hustlin', Hit You From the Back, I'm a G, Street Life, I'm Bad, Where My Money, I Need That, Get Away, White House, and the almost song is It Ain't a Problem. So that's kind of the concept, but I'll go ahead and talk about these. Yeah, there's just a number of songs on here that it's kind of difficult just because Wikipedia kind of spaces out the songs, so I can't see all the songs at once. But yeah, some of these that are hits are like Blow and I'm Bad. I feel like Blow is a real powerful kind of glossier Miami strip club infused type nightclub life. Blow is kind of a more nightlife infused, kind of neon and flashy lights type song, kind of similar to Push It. I really like the pace of Blow, and I really feel like Dre, who also was on the song of Rick Ross off his mixtape Chevy Riding High, they have good chemistry. I'm glad that Dre is on here. Dre from Cool and Dre is on here twice. I like these Dre and Rick Ross songs. They're pretty kick-ass. I want to say that Cool and Dre are from Florida also. Is probably the reason why they cross paths. But Blow is a nice nightlife song. I'm Bad really gives me nice vanilla nightclub type feels like it's ripped out of the 80s. There's a lot of songs on this album that kind of feel like they're ripped out of the 80s. Push It, obviously, Blow, Boss, I'm Bad. Some of these really feel like they're just ripped out of the 80s. I like that Rick Ross kind of had like a minor kind of mini theme of the Scarface and kind of Miami Vice type feel of like the 80s and the cocaine movement and some of that type stuff. It's really interesting to kind of get that. So I'm Bad. This kind of comes off as like a real vanilla kind of nightclub and night venue type song. It's kind of factory made Rick Ross. Boss is a nice one. This is a little bit more flashier beat. This is another hit with Dre from Cool and Dre. Blow and Boss are both two Blow and Boss are really two exuberant kind of songs that are just perfect for like stepping out and having a glossier type style towards them. So I feel like Push It, Blow, Boss, these are all songs that you need to mess with in like a flashier nightlife type style. Definitely equipped to do damage and that sort of stuff. Maybe not as hit ready as Hustlin' and quite as looming as Hustlin', but these are definitely some glitzy songs. I feel like Where My Money, I need that as a factory made clone of Hustlin', just not quite a signature. Like Hustlin' was the breakout hit, and that's definitely a signature continued career highlight for Rick Ross. But Where My Money is just kind of like if you've heard Hustlin' 1,000 times and you're like, damn, I want to hear a Rick Ross song that's like Hustlin' but is not that song. This is your song for that. So I feel like Where My Money is basically just like Hustlin'. It's just not quite as good. Or it's as good as that song. It definitely has a very carbon copy of that song. It's just not quite as distinct. So that's just kind of the concept. That's another nice one. There's some good songs for the ladies here. Like Hit You From the Back is a real sophisticated type song. It's not quite soulful. It seemed like Rick Ross wasn't quite on his soulful stuff quite yet as he would develop on like Deeper Than Rap and Teflon Don and some of those albums, but it's definitely a sophisticated song. I mean, despite the fact that it's kind of a crass song title and being called Hit You From the Back, it is quite sophisticated. It's just a nice one to be able to say that. So it's a nice one. I mean, it's not crass like it's like piggish or anything. It's just kind of the concept is just blunt. So I would say that that's kind of the concept. Getaway is a little bit, that one's another sophisticated one. One's a lot more tied up, a little bit more long-term relationship type feel compared to Hit You From the Back just being a little bit more of a sophisticated date. But these are both good songs for the ladies. And I feel like Street Life is a really nice promo song. This is a nice one. This kind of gives off like late 2000s club type cuts, but just in a more promo type feel. I mean, I feel like Street Life can be a club cut, but it's a little bit more promo, just kind of stepping out and being fashionable and dressing to impress and that type stuff. That's definitely how that reminds me of. White House is a pretty much stock made nightclub type song. This one's not a dance club or a White House is not necessarily like a standard club and dance club type song, but it's definitely like a night venue and a nightclub type feel, a little bit more fancy. Maybe you're in like a tuxedo or some pastels like they were back in the 80s. This is a little bit more dressed to impress type song, but this is more fancy and it's still a nightclub song, but it's just kind of a little bit more sophisticated compared to like Boss and I'm Bad and some of those type songs. So it's an interesting one. It's a real fancy one. Maybe not fancy, but just kind of a little bit more imposing type one. So that's kind of the concept about it. And I feel like towards the end of this album, like I'm a G with Lil Wayne and Briscoe is a nice. I'm a G with Lil Wayne and Briscoe is just a nice standard nightlife type song, a real fancy one. I mean, it's pretty simple production. Just really feels like a nice Friday night, Saturday night type stuff. Some of these are just meant for stepping out. They're just kind of interchangeable as far as that kind of goes. I mean, I feel like the production is kind of more thunderous and kind of brooding. I'm a G is, and then It Ain't a Problem kind of has it Ain't a Problem is kind of a grading song. That's kind of the reason why I picked it as an almost song is because the beat is not quite the beat loop is just a little bit grating compared to some of these other songs, but I still like it because it does feel pretty glitzy and nightlife induced, but just the beat loop kind of gets tiresome. It's a little bit quicker, ends a little bit quicker than it probably should, but it definitely feels like an exhilarating night if you can tolerate that beat. And Street Life has a nice kind of real, like I said, promo type beat in there. I like the kind of bells or whatever was in that song. It's maybe not bells, but just kind of keyboard tabs or whatever that was. And there's just a lot of these in here. There's a lot of these. White House sounds just like Hustlin' and Where My Money. And yeah, there's just some real nice ones on here. So to talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy, there were only 5 songs I didn't enjoy. I feel like I didn't like the Hustlin' remix, despite the fact that it had Jay-Z and Young Jeezy on there. Which Hustlin' remix had 2 drug aficionados on there with Jay-Z and Young Jeezy. You would have thought that this would have been a hit song, but it just really was not that different. I feel like the original song was just that much more distinct, and the remix didn't really contribute that much. It was just kind of a standard song. I mean, the beat varied a little bit, but not enough to really make it like another hit. And Prayer, I wasn't really into that one. Didn't really gel too well with Prayer. Pots and Pans, I like the beat on Pots and Pans, but I didn't really like that one. Was kind of a more toned down. Pots and Pans, I like the beat on Pots and Pans, but that one was a lot more of a personal song. This was not It's not a song I could see myself listening to as much. I used to listen to this song more back in the day, but it's not a song I would listen to too much often anymore. But it is a nice storytelling kind of song, a nice personal song if you like that. But I just wasn't gelling with it. And It's My Time was kind of like an I Made It kind of song. This is kind of a song for the ladies, but it's just kind of a more looking back and kind of reflecting kind of song that I just wasn't into as much. Didn't really vibe with that. It was kind of, this was not at the place where I was looking at this point in time in the song. It's My Time was a song that I wasn't really in agreement with as far as like looking at the mood of the song and that type of stuff, as far as being in a reflecting kind of mood. For the low, I just really didn't like the beat on here. I mean, it was really kind of an awkward one. I like Jazzy Faye. Typically, it's kind of he's a cool Atlanta producer and that type of stuff. I just didn't like the beat concoction for how that turned out for Rick Ross. This is kind of the most awkward. It was kind of trying to be like a dance club cut, but it just didn't really pull it off that well. So that was kind of a real awkward one. So those are just some of the ones. Like, there's just some awkward ones on here, some different moods. Like Rick Ross was trying to make this album balanced, which I suppose he did kind of pull off for the most part, but I just preferred the more kind of glitzy Miami bred nightlife type style that was on songs like Push It, Boss, Cross That Line, Hustlin', and Where My Money, and some of those type ones. And I also like the sophistication of Get Away and Hit You From the Back. I mean, overall, there's not much to complain about with this album because it hits the nail on the head over 2/3 of the time. I mean, 13 out of 18 is pretty outstanding, but it's just really nitpicks here and there as far as like there's not really too much of like a central, oh, there's not enough of this and there's not enough of that type feeling for the complaints about this project. It's just more, didn't really like the vibe of Pots and Pans and It's My Time, and didn't like the beat on For the Low and some of that type of stuff. So it's just more individual selected type complaints about it. But so I'm gonna go ahead and give this album me liking basically 12 and a half out of 18, almost 13 out of 18. I'm gonna go ahead and give this album an 8.5 out of 10. I mean, I feel like if I had liked at least one more song or two more songs, if I would have liked 13 out of 18, I would have given this album probably like an 8.75. But I feel like an 8.5 is just a small notch of a worse score. Just 8.5 pretty much indicates that it's a pretty damn good and effective project. So 8.5 out of 10. And the social score, I will give like a 9 out of 10, just because this has a lot of glossy moments. Like over half the album is pretty furious about stepping out and that type of stuff. So I definitely feel like as far as that kind of effectively goes, it's just a very central kind of theme. And Rick Ross has a pretty powerful and exuberant and vibrant kind of lifestyle as far as showing off the Miami glitz and glamour and that type of stuff. I would have liked a DJ Khaled beat on here. I noticed that DJ Khaled didn't really produce anything. Maybe DJ Khaled could have been on here, something like that, but he was at least on the mixtape. That's just some good stuff. I mean, for the most part, this album is a pretty much home run type album. I mean, it just exudes kind of that charisma of having it happen. And like I said, this is a seminal late 2000s rap album and Dirty South album for that matter. It just really kicks a lot of ass. And In terms of the future, like Rick Ross dropped an album in like late 2021, so we'll see what kind of happens there. I'm interested to see what Rick Ross's next move is, but I do like the fact that this project is pretty damn stellar and there's a lot of good things and great things to kind of talk about here. So that's kind of the thing.